All right. Well, like I said, I do want to respect and honor your time. Welcome to this PLC webinar. Our focus today is talking about using the AP Insight challenge area assessments and possibly for review. Um, Hopefully you have the ability to hear me. I'm guessing you do because you've all typed. I did give you guys microphone permission to speak. I don't know what's a little more natural for you, whether you'd prefer typing or if you'd prefer just speaking. Either way works for me. I do know that sometimes when everybody's on their microphones, we sometimes get feedback. But you know, we can always do the technology thing, just kind of play it by ear. So again, if you're more comfortable just typing into the chat box, and then I can just share out loud. Not that all of us can't read, but anyway, I'll probably still share out loud what you write in the chat box. Or if you, again, just want to activate your own microphone and jump in that way. Since this is a PLC, a lot of this is going to be discussion. So again, if you're more comfortable discussing out loud, you know, again, feel free to, you know, turn that on and join on in. Otherwise, of course, the chat box is there as well. And it looks like from the pre-meeting polls, as I'm sure you can all read each other's responses, it looks like all of us who are here right now have a few years under our belt of teaching AP. It looks like we're all new to using AP Insight this year, and for everyone, it looks like the main challenge is time. It looks like we all have kind of a different level of how we've integrated it. Jamie, it looks like you've mostly been using the hard copies, which is totally fine. And Jose, it looks like your challenge is, again, also time and not being able to use the performance task or assessments for grade and trying to figure out how this fits in with the review you already do for your A-Push class. And then working it into pacing looks like it's Mark's biggest challenge as well. Oh, and we have someone who just joined us. So Saul, welcome. Like I said, because I don't think you were quite signed in yet, and which is no big deal, of course. I'm sure all you East Coast people are just finishing up dinner or whatever it is you all do on the East Coast. Anyway, I am on the West Coast, so we got a couple hours till dinner. But we were just answering the group chat. Saul had just said that if you want to use your microphone, if you want to activate yourself and speak, that's fine. If you're worried about feedback or that sort of thing and you prefer to type, that's fine too. Either way works for me. It is a PLC, so it's just, again, us discussing. So whichever way works best for you works for me as well. And if you want to go ahead and type in, just so we know how many years you've been teaching A-Push, how long your school district's been using Insight, and what your greatest challenge, what is your greatest challenge with using the challenge area, performance tasks, and assessments. You can jot that down, and then I'll flip us to the next thing. Like I said, since this is mostly a discussion, there aren't too many slides here, since it's mostly us talking about how to best use the performance tasks and assessments. And in the meantime, while Saul's typing, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Katie Jew. I guess I already mentioned that I am on the West Coast. I'm from California, and I've been teaching A-Push for 11 years. I've been teaching for 12 years, and oh, actually, very very similar to Saul. I am also the only one using AP Insight in my district as well, which it looks like Saul as well. And the two greatest challenges to Saul is time to accomplish the tasks and getting students to complete the assessment, which is interesting. Hopefully we can talk about that more. My biggest challenge, like I think everybody else here, is definitely the time piece. A lot of the activities and the assessments take my students a little bit longer than maybe it was initially intended or designed to take. And that's okay, we're working with it, but that's definitely a challenge, planning how to take something that I thought was going to take 45 minutes, and then it takes like 2.5 days. So anyway, so definitely working with that one. Our agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Go back a slide. I was all excited and ahead of myself. Just as a reminder, these webinars are recorded. So if you miss something, or if you want to look at a previous webinar that you missed, the recordings are available on the Insight website. So again, if you missed a recording, you can go ahead and find that, or if you have colleagues or friends who teach Insight anywhere in the country, if they want to listen to this recording, this will be posted as well. So now let's go to the agenda. So our agenda for our agenda for today, like I already said, we're going to look at a couple of different challenge area performance tasks and assessments, and maybe talk about how to best use those for review, and then have a kind of open discussion at the end. And again, up to you whether you would prefer typing or just speaking out. Either way works for me. I am extraordinarily laid back. So again, I won't be offended if you jump in. It's really it's no big deal. The more people talk, probably the better, so we can all kind of work this thing out together, since it's all of our first years using Insight. I already told you who I was, so let's very briefly, if you want to look at the objectives before we move on to looking at our first performance task here, and our first challenge area, and the assessment. I'm assuming that most of this is things that you've become familiar with over the course of the year, but kind of the key takeaways are written there for you, reminding you the purpose of the performance tasks and assessments, reminding you that challenge area assessments are similar to AP questions, and because of this, they're probably beneficial to be used as a review before either an in-class exam or the AP exam itself. And again, the as it says here, the built-in targeting of challenging content and skills, along with the feedback and remediation that are part of Insight, make the challenge area performance tasks and assessment different from other forms of review we might all be used to doing in our classes. And I guess kind of the overall focus question of this whole hour-long PLC is, how can the challenge area performance tasks and assessments in AP Insight help students prepare for exams? As I'm sure you've noticed, the calendar is ticking away here, and we're already almost in March. So again, we are getting closer and closer to that test date. So again, review is probably creeping up in the back of our minds. I'm just starting the 1920s next week, so we're not quite to actual review yet, but again, it is something that will be coming up. So, all right, well, like I said, the way this is structured is we're going to look at a couple of different challenge areas and maybe talk about how we can use these different challenge areas and the performance tasks, and then the assessment that go with these challenge areas as a form of review, again, as we get nearer to the big final exam. So again, the slide is here, and it does tell you the challenge area we're going to focus on first, which is the argumentation, cause and effect of 20th century migration. I cheated, and I already pulled it up in another window on my computer, so I don't know if that would be easier for you. I definitely like to have the AP Insight open. So again, if you want to, if it's easy for you to open up the AP Insight page and pull up the first performance task. So the challenge area we're looking at is, again, the argumentation, cause and effect, 20th century migration. And we're looking specifically at kind of the performance task for this challenge area. So if you wanted to pull that up, it might make the conversation a little bit easier as you know what you're referring to. and I'm going to go back. Whew, sorry, I thought I lost. I thought I lost the presentation. Now just in a different window. Okay. So again, if you're equipped enough to toggle between two pages, that might be beneficial in us looking at how we would best use this one. So the challenge area, this first one that we're looking at, the 20th Century Migration Challenge area, the challenge area covers 3 periods, periods 7, 8, and 9. And the performance tasks for this challenge area can serve as a review of these periods. And both the performance task activities and the challenge area assessment ask students to use what they've learned about the Sun Belt across the periods, and this allows students to demonstrate what they understand in areas where misunderstandings remain. So I don't know if you want to take a little bit of time, if you're not familiar with this particular challenge area performance task, if you want to take a little bit of time to look at it, and then maybe we can talk about ways that we could use this particular performance task activity and then the DBQ that ends the entire challenge area. We can look at that as well and talk about how we might want to use this, have our students use this, excuse me, to review for the exam. So I don't know, I was thinking of just starting with the performance task activity and just looking at that. It looks like Jose is typing. So again, if you're able to toggle between two things, or if you're fancy and you have two screens, put one on one screen and one on the other. That's if you're fancy. All right, well, Jose has shared that he recently used part of this challenge area performance task, and there were two things that really stood out. So, Jose, if you want to either turn on your mic, that's fine, or if you want to type, either way works for me and probably everyone else.
Sure, I think it's probably better if I just speak and use the microphone. One of the main things that I liked about this particular challenge area is that it focuses on using quantitative data, which happens to be something that my students normally struggle with, that they find quite challenging. And I really like how it forces the students to make reasonable inferences and generalizations, especially after we had covered the Great Migration. I am currently about to start the Great Depression in the 1930s. So I used it a couple of weeks ago when we covered the Great Migration. And the other component that I really liked about this, that I actually find really useful from the other challenge areas as well, it's the real world case studies. This one in particular had a really good article from USA Today that focuses on the reversal of the Great Migration and African Americans now moving down to the South, which eventually it's going to allow us to really lay a foundation for the Sun Belt when we cover that later in the year. So just wanted to share that with people if they haven't had a chance to use it just yet. It's definitely worth incorporating it into the classroom.
But thank you. And just out of curiosity, with the real world case study, what was how much class time did you spend? Was that something you did in class, or did they read that at home for homework, or how did you
Well,
integrate that?
yeah, one of the main concerns that I have is trying to figure out the right balance between, having a very structured schedule at my school where I only meet with the students 4 times a week instead of 5 times a week. So what I normally do with the real world case studies is assign it as a reading homework so that when they come in the following day, that kind of becomes like the opening activity. And then we debrief that and then try to make connections to what we are discussing in that particular chapter. And I think the most important component of it is to try to get the students to be a bit more engaged and hopefully become a bit more motivated as well, so that they can see the relevance of the material that they are about to cover in the textbook. So the other thing that I try to do to try to use time effectively is to use a performance task in class, and then I try to assign any of the assessments, especially since they're formative and I cannot actually use a grade for it, as an after school activity or homework assignment as well. So I'm really limiting the instructional time to the performance tasks themselves. And that's what I'm trying to figure out with the review time coming up, because I normally allocate about 2 weeks before the AP exam and trying to identify which are the challenge areas and the performance tasks that I want to use during those 2 weeks.
Thank you. That's a great question that maybe other people can speak to as well. Has anyone, just out of curiosity, also used this particular activity yet? It looks like Jamie is typing, so. And then while Jamie's typing, Jose, you said you use the assessments outside of class or after class. Do you have an after class like meeting of the kids, kind of like a review session, or is that just an expectation they do the things on their own, like at home?
Well, it's a combination of both. We have mandatory tutorials on my school for 30 minutes every Monday through Thursday. So whenever I meet with my AP classes, if I'm assigning that, then we can work on it together during those 30 minutes. And normally, the assessments themselves, I believe they're not supposed to take more than 40 minutes. So we just might go a little bit overboard in the tutorial, but not by much.
Oh, okay.
And if
Okay.
and if we can't finish it, then it would be assigned for homework.
Okay, cool. All right, and Jamie has said that they used the quantitative piece and edited it to use only two of the charts, culminating with a short answer question. Okay, so that's interesting, editing it down. And Jamie, was that for time reasons? I'm assuming, but I don't want to assume since I'm not Jamie. So again, if it was just to make it fit better in your class, just type either yes or no. Oh, okay, yeah, timing. Um, I was going to take a look at it really quickly. Or if anyone who's used it knows off the top of your head, how many documents was it designed to originally have, or charts?
I think
Because
it
it looks
has
like
four
oh
documents.
four. Okay, so about half. All right. Yeah, that's something that I've been playing with too, with timing. For some of the ones I haven't gotten to this particular one yet, but for some of the other challenge areas, there are ones where I have had to edit some of the documents down or pick and choose just to make it fit better with the timing. So um, that's that's something I'm definitely playing with as well. Um, any thoughts for using this particular task for is anyone thinking about using this task as a review? I guess to structure my question in a way that makes more sense, is there anyone who's planning on not using this right at the moment you're teaching this particular topic? Like, is there anyone waiting to do this as something they're going to do, like maybe a couple weeks before the exam, as kind of a review session? Like, if your school has time for that sort of thing, or
This is Mark. Um, I I've been toying with this idea because I tried to be a little ambitious in terms of how many challenge areas I was going to do this year. I actually picked out 5 out of 10, and then after about the first 6 weeks of school, I realized that just was not going to happen. Um, so, but I have been toying with the idea. I was thinking, there is so much good stuff in this program. I actually think Insight's probably like the strongest thing the College Board's put out for this course. Um, and so I was thinking, like, how could I use some of this stuff I didn't want to kind of cherry pick different things out. Like when I'm looking at this migration, to be honest with you, I haven't even seen this before. Um, I've had a hard time just getting to the performance tasks. I've been, mostly doing the building blocks and using the quizzes, kind of like Jose said. I have them usually assign them the quizzes at home, as homework. Um, but I only have 2 weeks to review, and some of these activities take a good amount of time. So I'm really kind of trying to figure out whether or not, is doing a few of these activities kind of worth the amount of time it's going to take as opposed to doing kind of a standard review. So I guess I'm just kind of babbling here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like it could be really promising. A lot of the a lot of these performance tasks at the end of each challenge area. I just haven't figured out whether or not I can fit them in within a 2-week period.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm also struggling with exactly how to use them. I think kind of like Mark, I was probably over ambitious at the beginning as well, and then really had to kind of tone down. I really, like you said, it has a lot of great stuff in it, but timing wise, it's definitely um, trying to figure out which challenge areas are going to be most beneficial for my students. I guess I asked that because I think at this point I'm probably going to integrate this one not as a review for me, which I guess I hope that doesn't totally go against the point of this PLC. But I was thinking about maybe using the DBQ part as the review. I don't know. It looks like this particular performance task ends with the DBQ. I haven't used yet this year one of the DBQ assessments. I don't know if anybody has. I know they're shortened. I've looked at them, and I've had lofty ambitions to do some of them. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to the point of using any of the DBQ ones yet. I don't know if anyone else has. I heard wrestling. I thought someone was going to speak. I was really excited for a second. So if you want to speak, go ahead. Oh, it looks like Mark is typing. Um,
This is Saul. I don't know if you can hear me.
yep, we can. I can hear you, so I assume everyone else
Okay,
can as
great.
well.
So I just used the DBQ today. I did the modified DBQ today for Challenge Area 3, Culture 4.0. That's the Southern Identity one. And but the performance task itself took me 2 full class periods to get them through it. And but I think it was worth it because when they sat down to do the DBQ, they didn't totally freak. And I actually timed them and did not let them have any additional time unless it was in their 504 plan or IEP. So, and with 1 or 2 exceptions who sort of thought, I just need 1 more minute, I just need 1 more minute, they actually did do it. I was actually shocked. Now, I haven't read them yet. It just took this today. But the fact that pretty much they all sat there and they did the work and used the building blocks, and it really was. I used the Karate Kid as the example of what they were doing when they were doing the performance task the last 2 days. But as Mark said earlier, and as you've noted, Katie, it's a time suck. So that you're actually in the roaring 20s. I'm impressed. I just finished period 6 today. So, but that's just the way it goes. We'll get where we get, and good luck, man.
Well, it's good. Well, it's good to hear that you taking the time was worth it. I mean,
Yeah, no, it totally was worth it. And I wasn't sure. I'll be honest. I teach. We talked about this at one point. You and I. We teach very similar kids, and that they sometimes they do the work, sometimes they don't do the work. Sometimes they'll do the building block formative assessments, and sometimes they'll start them and not finish them, even if they are getting a homework grade for it. So that's what I do, Jose, is they get a homework grade. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so either you did it or you didn't do it, and if you didn't do it, you get a zero, which is really easy to grade. Um,
And are you going to do the so after you grade the DBQ, will you um, do you think you'll have time to do all the kind of follow-up reflection and
yeah, so what I will do is I had them do it on paper because they're going to have to write it on paper anyway. But I'll put the scores in Insight, and I encourage them to do for extra credit to pick one of the recommended next steps.
oh, okay.
So that's what they'll do, but I won't have time to go back and do that. We need to really book.
Yeah.
So I'm not
That's
sure.
that's
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many more building blocks I'm going to do because I'm finishing up some of the earlier ones, and I'm sort of loath. I'm doing the one right now on assimilation and immigration and assimilation. So I'll follow that one through to the end, but I think the other ones I've more or less finished, and I don't know that I can really afford to start new ones at this point.
yeah.
So that'll be
No,
about
that's fair.
five that I've done as well. So
Yeah,
Mark,
we're
you said you were starting five, and yeah, 10 is not happening.
now for those of you who have done like who have followed a challenge area almost all the way through, have you all made it to the assessment, the big final assessment part, or it sounded like you might have just done building block quizzes, or did you actually make it besides this DBQ? And this can be anybody. You can type or talk.
Yeah, I mean the challenge areas that I did, I basically stuck to the building blocks. So I made sure that I went through all the building blocks. I really like the way. I mean, it sounds pretty ridiculous, but I like the way they build on each other. And I noticed that my students kind of pick it up even as some of the challenge areas skip over some time periods. They'll be like, oh yeah, I remember we were doing this. Like I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize, but I I think the two or three that I've been concentrating on are the kind of continuity and change with political parties, the one on foreign policy,
Mhm.
and the one on the government and the economy. I think that's what it is. So the kids really kind of pick up, you know, like, oh yeah, I remember this. We did this a couple of weeks ago, and it's kind of building on that. And then I've been using the quizzes, to kind of make sure that they're getting, what they should out of the activities. But I think I've finished. I think I've finished two of them, and I think one of them I'm still in the middle of. But I mean, to be honest, I just don't have the time to do all of the pieces of each challenge area. So there was one challenge area that I did do that I skipped one of the building blocks because on my pacing guide, both building blocks fell on the same time, and my pace is about a chapter a week, and I just couldn't devote you know two of them in 1 week. That would have been way too much. So long story short, I guess I haven't done any of the big assessments at the end, but I do have my kids write a good amount of essays throughout the year, so um, they've been able to kind of incorporate because that's one thing I've noticed, like with DBQs and LEQs in my class. Sometimes my kids refer to some of the documents that are in, or some of the information that they learned in the building blocks, which makes me feel like they're worthwhile. So
Hey, Katie, what I would say is that there's only one challenge area that I've really done, all of it. That's the one of the economic reform movements, because that's one of the areas that my students normally tend to struggle with quite a bit. But there are two main observations that I guess I want to share with the group. Number one, just hearing what everyone is sharing, it, just highlights for me one of the really cool things about AP Insight, which is that it's not really prescriptive, and there's enough flexibility so that we can try to make it work, giving our realities with our respective schools. That's why I'm really focusing on the progress sheets and any reports or data that I can get to try to help me identify where my kids are really weak at, And that has helped me focus on the political parties one, the foreign policy, and I believe Mark mentioned those two as well, and the popular movement as the ones that I probably would be focusing on for the review. And as I was looking at those challenge areas, I think that the main observation that I made is that what I really like about them is that they really get at the heart of synthesis. And while we were creating AP Insight, we had a long discussion as to why synthesis wasn't one of the targeted um, components or historical thinking skills, but it is part of the DBQ and the long essay. And I think that a lot of these performance tasks really get at helping students see both changes and continuities over time, and for them to be able to go across time periods, which is something that they're going to have to do in the AP exam. So that's definitely kind of like a blessing in disguise that I picked up on, and that I think will really give my students a bigger bang for the buck as I get them ready for the AP exam.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. That's I think you really stumbled upon the kind of main things about why we all like the program so much. So thank you so much for that. Well, we did have a couple of other challenge areas. It feels kind of, I mean, I guess I can put them up. It looks like we're all kind of, it sounds like, I don't want to speak for anybody, but it sounds as though we might already have kind of planned out which challenge areas we might be focusing on for the year. So um, it's possible that the ones we pulled to talk about might not be ones that you might have focused on. Although I think I heard a couple of people talk about the political parties one. Um, so again, um, I guess for me, one of the things I was thinking about as everyone was speaking is there are there's the now I'm trying to remember which one it is. I guess I don't have all the numbers memorized, do I? But there was one that I did all the building blocks for, and now I'm trying to decide whether it's since I didn't do the final assessment, I guess I'm trying to figure out if that would be a good usage of my time as I get closer to the AP exam to try and integrate the final kind of performance task and assessment like Saul did like today, I guess,
Hmm.
in his class, or or if it's if that would be a worthwhile type of review for the ones that again I traced through the building blocks but didn't quite finish with the performance task and the final assessment on. I
That's,
don't know if any.
no, that's a really interesting idea because I'm looking at the couple that I didn't do like the one that Jose was just talking about, the economic reform movements. Like I haven't gotten to that, and I didn't start it, and I'm not about to pick it up, but it might be a good activity to do over a period of a few days as review. I'm going to be doing reviews after school though, because not all of my students take the tests. So um, I'm going to make them all suffer through the test, but they don't all take the test. But those that are going to, this would be a good review challenge area for them, all the way down to the long essay as a practice essay.
Do any of your schools do the coming in on spring break? Is that something that's the norm at your schools, or
Nope.
it's kind of no? Okay.
Yeah, not for us.
Okay. Yeah, it kind of I don't know. Somehow in the last couple of years became a thing at our school. So I was trying to think like if I could use one of the ones if it's worth it to because I did not choose all of them like I mentioned. I was a little over ambitious and realized that was not going to happen. There was no way I was going to be able to integrate every challenge area. So I guess I'm also trying to think if that would be a good thing to use over those spring break days, or again, if a traditional kind of review would be better. So much to choose from.
Well, do you do review after school or during school?
I generally do mine after school.
Okay.
And I've actually been doing a lot of the because my population does take a long time to finish up.
Hmm.
I have one day a week that's kind of devoted to kids who didn't quite finish the activities or the building blocks in class that they can come after school and work on that or the building block quiz after school. So I guess I don't know what's going to happen when I actually start my real AP review, if you know what I mean, like
Hmm.
how many days a week I'll be. I guess I'll just move in. I don't know. It's fine. It's a nice place. It has a heat and air conditioning.
Well, you're in LA, right?
Close to LA, Orange
Just
County.
LA, Orange County. So it's warm
Oh, and
anyway.
I'm sorry, Jamie. I didn't even. I apologize. I didn't notice that you had written. I was in my other window. Obviously, I'm not adept at toggling between two screens. We will only have 10 days after break before the exam. Oh, a late spring break. Wow, that's a that's a rough one.
Do any of you think it would be, I think it would be an interesting task to just, as a review, to take your students through an entire challenge area. Um, because like Jose said, I think one of the great things about this program is it really drives home synthesis. I mean, it's like no way you can do a challenge area without kids picking up the idea that, there are kind of similarities between all the different time periods for that different theme. Um, I just wonder if, time-wise, if that's feasible. I wonder, I know we were told that, like for example, the building block activities were supposed to be 40 minutes, but that's like a dream for me. I can't get through any of them in 40 minutes. So I'm just thinking, it would be a really interesting task to say today, today and tomorrow we're going to do, uh, political parties and just kind of take kids through the whole, all four. I think there's four building blocks to that one, and then do the performance task at the end. Has anybody considered that at all, or want to comment on that?
Yeah, I'm actually considering that for two of the challenge areas. I think that's what I was saying. Yeah, that going through for the review as one about the reform movements in economics is one that I was looking at in terms of that, particularly because I didn't start it in the cycle, um, and and I started the political parties one, but I've sort of dropped it, so I might pick that up, the rest of it up as part of the review as well, if I can squeeze both those in. And there are just going to be some that I'm not doing, like the 20th century migration. It's just not going to happen. It's all at the end, and I'm not going to have time for it.
Yeah, it's also what I'm planning on doing with the three that I mentioned that I'm going to try to focus on, the
Yeah.
political parties and the foreign policy. And with the popular movements, just to cite a specific example, the performance task really walks them through the antebellum reforms, then it goes into the civil rights movement, then finally into group identity reform movements of the 60s and the 70s, and then into the conservative movement. So at that point, once I'm done with the Reagan years, then it's definitely one of those performance tasks that I do want to do with my students so that they don't see it in isolation or in a vacuum, and they're able to make the connections across the time periods. That's what I was able to do with the economic reform one, which is the one that I have done with my kids.
Hmm.
My students normally struggle trying to, differentiate, especially nuanced distinctions between the progressives and the populists. Um, so that particular challenge area really gets to the heart of that, and also incorporating, the role of the labor unions and the market revolution. Um, so I think this is where we can get the biggest bang for the buck, as I said earlier, and especially with the synthesis component.
Jose, hey
Yeah,
Jose, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Um, so now you're starting to get my brain going here. I'm wondering if, and I know the program isn't designed to be cherry picked, but I mean, I
Right.
wonder if, as a review, just using the performance tasks, kind of going through. I mean, I definitely couldn't do 10 of them. That's absolutely crazy. But um,
Right.
I mean, I've focused on three challenge areas, and I think I'm going to be able to finish the three of them in terms of going through all the building blocks and all the quizzes. But I'm just wondering, it might be a good idea in general just to pick, you know, four or five of the challenge areas and just use the performance tasks as review, because it's not like the kids haven't done the material, it's not like they don't have the context from, going through the course anyway. They might not have the particulars of the building blocks that go along with them, but I would think that it would be, they should have enough behind them to be able to kind of go through. Because like you're saying, I mean, they take them through several periods. So,
Right.
maybe instead of trying to do an entire challenge area, maybe it's just focusing on the performance tasks at the end.
And that's what I'm going to try to do with the three that I mentioned, the political parties, foreign policy, and the popular movements, because it worked really well for the economic reforms with my kids. And given the time constraints and what I've done for the last 13 years that I know helps my kids prepare for the AP exam, I kind of feel like this is probably the best approach. It may not be ideal, but we've lost a couple of instructional days on here, and I think that that's how I can really incorporate it and make it work for my student population.
How much time do you have to review?
I normally have about 2 weeks is what we allocate for review.
That's about what I have to. Okay. Saul, how much time do you have?
Oh man, like I don't know, maybe if I'm lucky, 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But we do a district after school program, and I also offer the opportunity for about 2 weeks of twice a week after school.
Got it. Got it.
And then Jamie says they have 5 days and tutoring after school.
And then,
Um, I
Catherine,
mean, I think the other thing to consider is if it's not just the content that the kids might be struggling with, is maybe focus on a challenge area based on a particular historical thinking skill. I know that, for me, one of the reasons why I picked the economic reforms is also because my kids tend to struggle with continuities when they're doing CCOT. So I wanted to make sure that I hammer that point across. Um, and that might provide some additional guidance to inform the challenge areas that we might want to focus on as part of the review.
yeah, and I think that's why I'm kind of thinking toward doing the performance test also, because my kids are like fact hounds. Like they'll sit there and memorize and make cards and
Yeah.
Quizlet and all that other stuff. Like the facts part isn't really the challenge for them; it's what they can do with it. So, I often in years past have really focused on making sure they understand key content, right? Going through review. Um, but I'm thinking with a program like this, um, it might be a good marriage between the both, because there are topics, obviously the challenger is based on topics that, students traditionally struggle with, but then also getting them to kind of really practice the skills that they're going to see on the exam anyway. So instead of sitting there just drilling content, it'd be really helpful to have them doing something, because I know my kids are going to sit there and make all kinds of charts and all that other kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, and it's not just the historical thinking skills per se, but one of the things that my students tend to struggle with, it's not necessarily making a claim or an argument, but really supporting and developing that and trying to tie back the content to the original thesis statement. And some of the performance tasks specifically target that. So they kind of like really isolate with different activities how to tie the evidence back to the original claim. That's one of the things that I liked about the economic reform ones as well. And that became a really good way for my students to try to focus on that second point of fully substantiating your argument for the long essay, because that was kind of like where they were dropping the ball along with synthesis. And that's why I think I'm going to focus on the performance task.
have any of you come across on the Insight program any of the challenge areas that do a good job of getting kids to connect like source analysis to an argument because I mean I know my kids that's probably one of the hardest things. You know, they can name the purpose or the intended audience or point of view or whatever, but getting them to actually like make that part of their argument is a struggle. So I would be looking, that would be great, to do in a review to make sure that I have something that kind of really drives that home.
Actually, the performance task for the one on Southern Identity is all about making sure not only doing the things that you just mentioned, Mark, the audience point of view, purpose, but also providing that last bit. Why is this going to support my thesis?
Mhm.
So it actually that was the whole focus of it, which is why it was a really nice building block. It was like the culmination of the Karate Kid before they did the DBQ today in class. So it wasn't alien. Like I said, I haven't read them yet, but I'm hoping that at least one of
Is
them
that
get it right.
the context and regional identities? Is that the one supporting claims? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Southern Idea. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check that one out then. Thanks.
Hmm.
I'll just chime in on it, but I just started my kids on synthesis in the second semester, so we're only I'm in the Northeast, so we're only in about halfway through the first half of the second semester. So today, actually, I had my kids go back to a DDQ that they had done last week and work on the synthesis part. Um, I guess I'm kind of beating a old horse here, but I really do think that this program really does a great job of getting kids to think across periods. I know when we were at the reading last year, there was people that were saying that, oh, the synthesis point is the hardest point, and that's the difference between kids getting 4 or 5 on the exam. It's like a really high, performing students will get it. Everybody else, I even had some teachers tell me, like just have the kids concentrate on the other 6 points because really not worth the time. Let them get the documents down, all that kind of stuff. But I think with something like this, I think it really gives kids a really good chance at learning it because it's pretty, I mean, it's not the basis of it, but it's pretty much kind of built into what you're doing because you're crossing so many time periods with the same theme.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I feel like the the challenge areas that I chose this year were the ones that were most of the changing continuity and change over time, since that is probably the biggest of all the skills that my kids struggle with the most. So I it seems like it's making a difference. Even if it, I would assume it'll show on the test, but I mean, I feel like they actually have a much better understanding of that this year than they have in the past. So, which I'll attribute to the challenge areas that I chose. Or at the very least, it made me think more about it than I ever had before. Maybe a little more systematically than I would have without it.
So what have you found to be the biggest challenge for them, Kitty, in terms of the CCOT part
Of the, I'm sorry, of the which part?
of the continuity and change over time? Um,
Um, I think for my kids, they have, and I think someone else already said this earlier, maybe Jose, they struggle with continuity over time. They
hmm
they seem
Yes.
to change is not hard for them because I think it's a little more obvious. I think continuity is a little more can be more subtle for them. Um, but I do feel like that they're getting a much better handle on it than maybe in previous years. One of the ones that I focused on was the ethnicity and assimilation ones. So that's one that we've been doing this year. So
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's. I was just curious because I have a similar struggle.
I mean, even starting with the word continuity, that's like That takes a whole day in itself. So, which which I know sounds like a terrible joke, but I mean it's true. They really don't have a lot of the academic language skills that I think sometimes we take for granted.
Yeah.
I found that my kids got a better grasp on continuity change over time. Ironically, when I started doing periodization, um, because
Mhm.
I told them that periodization is like, so, I think a turning point is being like something at the end of the chapter or the beginning of the next chapter. Like why do you put, I don't know, um, Spanish American War at the beginning of a chapter? Why is it just not in the middle of a chapter someplace? Um, and then from there, understanding kind of like turning points as being like bookends. Uh, and they started getting like, oh, continuity change is what happens in between the bookends. Um, but I think you're right. I think the change part is easy. Kids pick that up real easy. I think my kids struggle with the continuity by making like these massive generalizations, like doing sectionalism. Like the Mexican American War LEQ that came out 2 years ago, and I had some kids write, and slavery still existed. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like, can you just nuance that a tad bit for me? I mean, Jesus, give me a break. Um, but I think you're right, though. I think kids don't
But
get,
did it?
uh, they see the broader, right, and the broader kind of continuities and not really dig into them deep because the changes are usually the ones that are the most obvious.
But more importantly, Mark, did it change everything
Well, we
forever
all
after
know
that?
that's the truth. For every event, nothing has ever
Right.
been the same since every event in American history. So,
That's yeah.
yeah, you can tell it's this time of the year. It's just like get me to spring break, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just had another idea that I'm not even sure if I'm going to use, and I just want to bounce it off everyone. So there's one challenge area that I've done with my students. There's three that I'm going to focus on. I'm thinking for the review, and I'm wondering if maybe I should have my students really engage in some self-reflection and look at the remaining six challenge areas and try to identify which one they feel least comfortable with, or that they would hate to get a DBQ or long essay on the AP exam, and then have them work through that independently. Because one of the good things about AP Insight and the quizzes at the end is that they do get that immediate feedback. And then they can select some of the assessments, whether it's the short answers, the long answer, the DBQ, that I can then, read and provide them with individual feedback. And I think it's also, something that will get at differentiation as well, which is really big in my school district. Um, because that's something that I've normally done in the past prior to having AP Insight, but with just assigning topics that they don't feel comfortable with. And I'm wondering if that's something that you guys think might possibly yield any positive results with kids. Hello?
It does look like Jamie's typing something, so
Oh, okay. I couldn't
I
hear
didn't want to.
anyone.
I didn't. I didn't. I just didn't want to interrupt
And
someone
I was
talking.
afraid I might have been dropped from the call.
Oh, yeah. Everyone left. Jamie thinks that is a great idea, particularly the reflection and self-assessment. So would you pose, just to make sure I'm following, would you pose of the three challenge areas and then just let them
Well,
kind of
no,
tailor it?
I'm, um, I have control issues, so I would want to do those three challenge
Okay.
areas that I want to target with the
Okay.
entire class. We've already done the economic reform ones, So out of the other six that remain that I really didn't get to incorporate because like Mark too, I thought I was going to do, all 10 of them. And then I realized there's no way, Jose, that I can actually, include all of them into my curriculum. So let the students reflect in those six that we really didn't get to use as much, and then select one that they individually or maybe in pairs or small groups will work on. That they would hope that they wouldn't get, a DBQ or long essay question on the AP exam on that particular area because that's really where they need to grow or they don't feel as comfortable, and then giving them some type of credit for working their way through it.
I actually think that sounds like a really cool idea. I'm actually thinking of maybe doing something like that with my after school review. Because sometimes, especially when we get closer, instead of saying like, what questions do you still have? Like what part of history do you not know? That might be a really cool thing to take the ones we didn't do and say, okay, we're going to do one of these. Which one? So I actually really like that idea. I think I'm totally stealing that.
And I mean, and the reality is that AP Insight is supposed to be focusing on material that it's foundational, right? That it's essential. So I would assume that the kids might also be likely to be tested on this material. So, that it would, like I like to say, it would give them a bigger bang for the buck.
That's a really good point. Um, Although, as I put my test together for period 6 and was going through the few released exams that exist,
Uh-huh.
um, there were a total of 4 multiple choice question sets between the 2014, 2015, and the sort of sample set for period 6 through 9. And that was it. There were four bits for period 6. Um, and it's a huge sprawling time period, 65 to 1898 with lots of stuff in there. I was a bit, I don't know, surprised actually when I went back to analyze to look at that. And I was like, really? That's it? It just surprised me. But I think you're right, though. I think we can still take it that the skill sets are foundational and some of the concepts are ones that they struggle with in terms of overall, and that letting them choose is, all right, we got these 3 things here.
Hmm.
What do you feel like you're struggling the most with?
Right.
And we'll go with that. And you'll still build a foundation for skills.
Right, that hopefully they're going to be able to transfer to a different scenario, including the
Right.
the exam, because those are transferable skills.
Hopefully they go beyond concrete operational skills. I'm teaching AP Psych this year too.
Oh,
Nice.
yeah, we actually only have 1 minute left officially. But just because out of personal curiosity that has really nothing to do with this presentation, are any of you going to like integrate like one more next year now that you've figured out how to, or are you going to stick with the same challenge areas? Has anyone thought that far, or are we just all trying to get through the exam?
I'm trying to get to the exam, Katie.
Yeah,
I
understood.
would like to think that I will, but I would also go back through the different ones that I've done, the building blocks that I've already done, and really take a red pen to them because I need them to fit into my 42-minute class period.
Yeah.
Because I can't have them taking 2.5 days, and that's partly why I just finished period 6. I was overly ambitious at the front end, and it sort of cost me at this point.
I think for me, it's going to depend on my instructional planning report. So once I get that back, if I see that the kids were tested in one of these other challenge areas that I didn't get to, then, I felt a bit guilty at first, like I was shortchanged, and then I will go back to the drawing board. So it kind of like remains to be seen for me.
Very cool. Jamie, oh, Jamie is typing. Thank you. There is a link there for just a kind of feedback survey. So again, there's a link there in the group chat, and that was our hour. I think we kind of went down a rabbit hole, but that's okay. Hopefully, it was still useful to you. I know that I'm gonna take Jose's idea of asking the kids which challenge area they think would be most or topic would be most threatening to them on an exam, and use that as the review. So thank you so much, Jose.
My pleasure.
And thank you, Katie, for hosting us.
Yeah, no problem. So thanks for sticking with it. My very first PLC. So there we are.
Way to go. All right. Well, everybody have a good night.
Thank
Yeah, you
you.
too. Thank you.
Have a good night.